Good afternoon. Today is March 4th, 2025, and this is the bill hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. First, calling House Bill 498, and we have a very special guest with us today that will be presenting the bill. Governor Moore, if you would like to come on up when you're ready and bring your panel. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee.
Wow, I didn't come here more often. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Both to the chair and the vice chair, I just want to say how much I appreciate it. Just having both having me here and just giving us the honor to be able to testify on a bill that we're not just really grateful for the chance to have a hearing on, but also just really looking forward to working with you all on, and that is the Decade Act. And the Decade Act, we just believe is an important component as part of a larger economic growth drive that we know is just not just important, but frankly, in this moment, it really does become imperative. And I do think that in order for us to understand where we want to go for the next decade, we also have to understand what has happened in the past one. And that has helped to shape and reflect how we think about what needs to be done and the things that we want to be able to leverage in order to truly capture this moment and take advantage of the opportunities that we have within the state. Because we saw that over the last decade that the economy for our state, that it grew at less than half of the rate of the national average. We saw that 17 of the last 20 state budgets required cuts in order for them to be constitutionally balanced. We saw that spending increased during that period of time by a margin of 70%. But the challenge was this, is that while we saw our spending increase, our economy did not. And so basically what was happening was we were spending, but we weren't growing. The thing and why that matters so much is this, is that if our economy was growing at not even just the national average, but even just closer to the national average that we saw during that same period of time, you know what we would not have is a structural deficit. Part of the challenge that we're dealing with right now is that we have not kept pace when it comes to growth. And that's really what this conversation is about. That's what we are excited that we're hoping that the Decade Act can be a core part of being able to help address that challenge. Because the thing that I know that each and every person in this room and outside can agree on is that Maryland needs to grow. The only way out is growth. And that's why we believe that the Decade Act is important, because it does advance this idea with three clear, distinct baselines. The first is that we need focused investments in high potential sectors inside of the state of Maryland, that Maryland can in fact lead the country and in fact lead the world, but Maryland needs to choose what it is going to help to lead the world in. As many of you know, my background was in both the military and the private sector. I spent a lot of time in finance looking at business models. I have never seen a business model or seen a business that is working when you ask them, what do you focus on? And their answer is everything. They have a distinct answer as to what it is that they are going to prioritize, what it is that they spend their capital on, and how they can both drive growth and how they can then drive their results. And when we think about Maryland, I want Maryland to be the capital of quantum. I want Maryland to be the capital of AI. I want Maryland to be the capital of cybersecurity. I want us to make sure that we are leading in aerospace and defense. The reason that I believe in those areas is because we have done the data and we know that Maryland has unique assets in those spaces that are tethered to the state of Maryland, that we have a unique competitive advantage to win at as long as we are willing to seize those opportunities. The second piece is that we need to double down on business attraction, double down on development, and double down on expansion. That we have data on the impact of state programs, and we're proposing improvements that we can actually scale them up, but we also need to understand and be clear about what is working and making sure we're investing in those, and be clear about what is not working and stop investing in those things as well. And the third is that we must invest in programs that are actually have a real chance, and both not just chance, but also a track record of long-term success. And that is why in our proposed budget, we direct $128 million in targeted investments, but we're also very clear that just putting money into it is not going to be enough, that the capital is important, that the strategy is tantamount. And so our administration has spent the time, and we have studied dozens of state initiatives that are on the books that are designed to help our economy to grow, that we have poured over countless reports, we have poured over state documents, we have poured over internal reports, we have worked with our partners, some of whom I have the honor of sitting with here today. We have dug into analysis from DLS, we have dug into analysis from the Department of Commerce, we have dug into analysis from many of our shareholders and stakeholders who know this work best, the people who are inside of the industries. And we have uncovered the areas and the assets that we know that have the unique power to be able to unleash the kind of economic growth that is going to provide the kind of ROI, or return on investment, that this state and this moment is going to require. And we believe that by marrying data and strategy, it is going to help us to sharpen the tools that we have and to help us to make us not just economically grow and economically competitive, but also importantly, and most importantly, that we can be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I have said before, and you all have heard me say, that unfortunately, oftentimes, Maryland has been asset rich, but we've been strategy poor. That I will put our assets against anyone else inside of the entire country, from NASA Goddard to NASA Willips, from Fort Meade to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, from Frostburg in the west to UMES in the east, that we have everything that we need in order to succeed, from the labs to the schools to the facilities to the organizations, most importantly, to the people, that this is the highest percentage of TS clearances anywhere in the entire country, that this is the most educated population per capita in the entire country. However, we've got to do a better job of being able to leverage those assets and also drive private sector growth. And I believe that the Decade Act is going to be a critical part of that strategy and a critical part of that partnership. I want to apologize in advance. I know this bill is over 130 pages long. I want to thank each and every one of you for going into the 130 pages. Each of them are important, but the spirit of the legislation is actually can be broken down pretty simply. And it's that we have to be able to build out our state programs, and that can get us closer to actually dominating these industries of the future. These industries of the future that have quantitative analysis behind them to show why we are so bullish on these industries, and either repeal or revamp the state projects and the state programs that are not fulfilling their intended use or their desired need. We are always going to make sure that we are defending the incumbent industries in our state, because the incumbent industries in many ways have been the thing that have been the heartbeat for our state. We also need to make sure that we're not simply relying on them, that this does become a time when we can and uniquely diversify our economic offerings and make sure that in this next decade and beyond, that when people say, what industries are Maryland known for, we can say more than just the eds, the feds, and the meds. That we have a chance to actually show new, unique industries that we're taking a lead on investing in. And when people say that being able to put capital towards these different types of industries, it is risky, my answer to them is this: doing nothing is riskier. Just simply thinking that we can go along is much, much riskier. That when we're watching industries, when we're watching other states that have taken bets, that have taken punts, and that have benefited from a risk-taking, a strategic risk-taking strategy, I think that they can now look back and say that they were successful because of it. And I want Maryland to be able to be included inside of that conversation. That if we can bet big on Maryland, we are going to bet big on our success. And so I'm grateful for the time here to spend time with each and every one of you on this bill, thankful for the consideration and for the opportunity to testify personally on behalf of it. And I look forward to answering any questions that you all might have.
Mr. Secretary, is this your first time before the Ways and Means Committee?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Welcome to the Ways and Means.
Thank you. Appreciate the welcome. Good afternoon. For the record, I am Harry Coker, Acting Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce. As you know, the challenges that face Maryland are complex and multifaceted, and it's more important now than ever for Maryland to make those strategic investments in growing our economy. Several provisions of the Decade Act will allow commerce to be more nimble, more effective, and more responsive to shifts in economic and market conditions moving forward. The Decade Act revamps the Buy Maryland Cyber Credit, largely by removing arbitrary program restrictions to make the program more effective and more beneficial to Maryland-based firms. This proposal takes the recommendations from both the Cybersecurity Association and the DLS to make the following meaningful improvements. It eliminates the limit on the size of the company that can be considered a qualified buyer for the credit. It increases the limit on annual revenue for a business to be considered a qualified seller for the credit. It increases the amount of credits that can be claimed by a qualified buyer that purchases from a single qualified seller. It eliminates the requirement that 25% of the credit be awarded to qualified buyers that purchase cybersecurity services as opposed to products. And perhaps most importantly, it makes the tax credit refundable so that nonprofits or businesses that are pre-revenue can benefit from the incentives to make the company more secure. This program, if fully funded or fully supported, is a win-win. It incentivizes Maryland businesses to purchase Maryland-based cybersecurity products and services, and it will allow nonprofits to also benefit from the program. This revamped program should make Maryland companies and nonprofits more secure and will support our state's cybersecurity companies. The bill also strengthens and rebrands two of our primary small business assistance programs, the Maryland Small Business Development Financing Authority, or Ms. BITSA, and the Small Minority and Women-Owned Business Account, SMWOBA. Increasing the amount of assistance that can be provided is important to modernize Ms. BITSA and make it more effective. But splitting the VLT revenue is the most critical update in this section of the bill. Ms. BITSA provides access to capital that disadvantaged borrowers cannot access traditional banking, but it has been largely reliant on special funds. Splitting this funding stream with SMWOBA provides sustainable revenue to keep funding available for those business owners. And because SMWOBA is a revolving loan fund, it is capitalized to a level that it can continue to lend the same amounts annually. Ultimately, this will make different forms of assistance available for the businesses served by SMWOBA and Ms. BITSA, and we'll do it in a revenue-neutral way. I'll yield to others to discuss other specific provisions, but Maryland Commerce respectfully requests a favorable report on this legislation. Thank you.
Ms. Schultz, this is not your first time in a General
I was going to say,
Assembly,
Madam Chair.
but welcome back. We know this wasn't your committee, you were on that other committee, but welcome back. Very, very good to see you.
It's wonderful to be here.
We're a
Thank you.
friendly committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always good to be in Ways and Means. Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Kelly Schultz, and I am the CEO of the Maryland Tech Council. We at the Maryland Tech Council are now almost 900 members strong, from life sciences and tech companies doing business in Maryland. We strongly support the Decade Act and thank Governor Moore and his staff for introducing it. We applaud the administration's strategic examination of the economic development tools across numerous state agencies and programs. This bill has many important reforms, over 100 pages of them, actually, but I want to highlight just two in particular and how they relate to our members. The first being the target industry sectors. The bill requires the Department of Commerce to evaluate the potential employment and economic growth of Maryland's industry sectors and establish a list of industry sectors and activities to be considered for additional state investment and support. The governor has already identified 3 industries we must invest in: life sciences, IT, and aerospace and defense. The governor also speaks about Maryland being the capital of quantum, AI, clean energy, and biotech. Our members could not agree more with this strategic focus, and aligning state government resources with these key industry sectors will help ensure that we are growing our strengths. The second important aspect of this, just to touch on it, is research and development tax credit. MTC particularly supports the administration's proposal to extend the research and development tax credit program through at least June 30th, 2030. We have numerous members who have benefited from this program and believe it is one of the state's most effective economic tools. We surveyed our members about the importance of this program, but I did want to share just one of the responses that came back to us from a small, almost mid-sized company. The R&D tax credit has been instrumental in enabling our business to expand research initiatives, develop groundbreaking technologies, and attract top-tier talent to Maryland. These investments not only drive innovation, but also create high-quality jobs and contribute to Maryland's leadership in the biotechnology and life science sectors. By reducing the financial burdens of R&D, the program fosters a competitive business environment, attracts investment, and strengthens Maryland's position as a hub for technology development. We again thank the administration for their leadership in supporting Maryland's life science and tech industries, and we put our full support behind this bill. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Great. And for the record, I'm Mark Anthony Thomas. I lead the Greater Baltimore Committee. And I'm the first CEO since our merger with the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. And we recently announced an acquisition of Upsurge, which is a tech ecosystem builder for the Baltimore region. For 2 years, this administration has worked closely with industry leaders to put the state on the path for private sector business growth and reposition Maryland as a competitive economy. It is moments of crisis that have transformed America's major state economic powerhouses. The Great Recession helped transform Massachusetts into a life sciences leader. It positioned New York City and New York State as the international tech rival for Silicon Valley. It also sparked manufacturing growth from semiconductors to energy innovation across the Southwest and the Southeast. This is Maryland's moment. And the governor's proposal fundamentally reorients the state to deliver 3 objectives that are critical to our long-term financial viability for our communities, our businesses, and investors depending on this collective action. It creates new and improved tools to support economic development deals, enhancing critical programs, and speeding up funding to make deals happen. This will augment the work that's been underway to better brand Maryland and the Baltimore region as places for tremendous economic opportunity and distinct regional economies that exist across the state while investing in workforce development, a decisive factor for business growth decisions. It also identifies strategic industries for Maryland's long-term competitive edge, which we've talked about today. This will galvanize and align state, academic, and private sector resources to make the big bets required for us to win and advance our standing as an innovation-driven contributor to America's technological and national security objectives. Most importantly, this year sets the foundation for continued focus on economic growth, centering a function that both government and the private sector leaders must equally invest in for our state to thrive. And it is for these reasons that the GBC supports this bill and look forward to executing on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Brett Fallon, Deputy Legislative Officer to Governor Moore, just here to help answer any questions.
With that, first, I do want to recognize the drafter of this bill, George Butler. And that was a very well-deserved applause, so thank you. And
We owe you a drink.
before we jump to questions, and I see a couple, Mr. Governor, I would just like to thank you and your administration for your commitment to Maryland's economy and to your goal of reinvigorating it and to grow the businesses that we have here. I was born and raised in this state, and I don't have to be convinced that this is the best place to live. It absolutely is the best place to live. You know, my mom was a public school teacher, and my dad has been had his own business since '81. And, you know, I know troubles that he's had, good times that he's had in working with the government and different administrations. So I look forward to, you know, moving something positive forward, and just welcome and thank you for your partnership to the economy and the small businesses in the state of Maryland. So thank you for
Madam
that.
Chair. Thank you.
We will start off with Delegate Buckle.
And all the folks who appeared on the panel. I really, sharing that, I appreciate so much your focus on economic development, the recognition that I believe we share with you, that the way forward is growth. Growth is hard. The three options we're confronted with: raise taxes. We can't tax our way to prosperity. I think I've heard you say that. We cut. We'll have to have some cuts, but we can't cut ourselves down to the point where we're no longer functioning the way we want government to function. And so the third way forward is growth, which is the hardest way to get there. It takes longer. And I appreciate there's a lot of good things in this bill. I'm going to give you credit for all of those, and we'll blame George Butler for all of the bad things apparently that are in the bill. But I do have a couple of concerns. You know where I'm from. You've been there, and I appreciated that on several occasions. And what we're concerned about so much, parts of this state, including Western Maryland, we were very based for generations on manufacturing, and we were very successful. And we were very kind of wealthy, actually. If you look back in the 1960s, 1970s, Allegheny County was wealthier than Howard County. That's right. That amazes people today, but that's true. That's right. And it was based on having these large-scale industries and the corporate jobs, the leadership jobs that came with them. We've lost all that through whatever reason. Some of it's globalization, some of it's a lot of factors, but some of it is the policies of the state of Maryland that are very different than our neighbors' labor policies, environmental policies, natural resources, extractive industry policies. We've lost a lot of our ability to succeed. And one of the things I'm concerned with in the bill is, and these might be small things, I'm not here to suggest that these enhancements driven towards economically disadvantaged areas on the outskirts of the metropolitan areas, I'm not here to tell you that they worked great. I wish they had worked better, but they were something. So the IITC and the biotech enhancement for places like Allegheny, Somerset, Dorchester, Garrett. Someone wants to come into the biotech industry. We know they like to go to Montgomery County. Montgomery County's great. We know they like to go to Howard County. We know that places like to come to Anne Arundel County. We always wanted to give them a little bit more taste, a little bit more sugar, so to speak. If you choose to come to one of these other places an hour or two away, we get a little more. So that element of it, and the element of completely eliminating the One Maryland credit. The One Maryland credit was something that the Speaker of the House from Cumberland, Maryland came up with 20-some years ago. Democratic Speaker of the House, obviously, from Cumberland, Maryland, just for those of you who don't catch that. And he did that because he wanted all of Maryland to succeed, from the west to the east and every point in between. And actually what's happened, as I know the folks of your Commerce Department know this, the biggest beneficiary of One Maryland tax credits over the life of the program has been Baltimore City. By a very wide margin, Baltimore City and Baltimore City businesses and job creation have gotten more out of the program than any other economically disadvantaged area. Would you work with us as we work through this bill to maybe consider ways? I'm just concerned about when we remove those geographic incentives, when we remove those geographic specialties, even if they didn't work perfectly, maybe there's a way we can do it better. I'm terrified that we get back to our entire economic development incentive program focuses on those 5 or 6 or 7 counties, because they already have so much. They already have so much, and we need more. But they have biotech, they have life sciences, they have quantum computing, they have these things. We don't have any of it. And my goodness, we'd like it. We'd love for people like that to come there. Do you have any, your administration, continued willingness to work through the bill to maybe save some of those things or work together to bring those jobs and those industries with credits into the areas where some of the rest of us live?
Absolutely, Leader. And first, thank you for that. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your commitment to partnership. And the answer is absolutely. We look forward to working with you to make sure that we can perfect what we're offering, because something that I am and have been hypersensitive to is if you're not coming up with something that is recognizing the unique opportunity that exists within every part of the state, then having growth in certain parts and a decrease in certain parts is actually not an advantage for the state. It actually means you're essentially serving par. which is not good enough and which is not the intent of what we have for the Decade Act. So 100% we are willing to work with you. When I think about places and the advantages that we have over in Western Maryland, when you think about things like the Western Maryland Economic Development Fund, I mean, part of that was actually making sure that we can center our work and center capital on the unique advantages that do take place within Western Maryland.
Got a good bill on that later this afternoon if you want to stick around.
That's exactly right. And so that's one of the reasons that we believe in that, because we think we do need to be specific and bespoke about some of the individualized areas. But when we think about some of the programs that we're either looking to repeal or to sunset in this, and the One Maryland is just one indication that we talked about, we just knew that in order for this to be effective and successful, that we had to be really disciplined and quantitative about which were driving the kind of ROI that we were requiring and that we were looking for, and being relatively unemotional about it and saying, is this driving the kind of ROI that we think requires further investment, or is this something that we need to be able to re-examine, specifically in a time when I wish we had more resources to say, let's just put capital into everything. We don't. And so by being able to put that really defined lens on it is, I think, how we came to a lot of the analysis about which things we're going to support, and about which things like the Western Maryland Economic Development Fund could actually serve as a better catalyst for economic growth within the area than what we've seen thus far about how One Maryland, to your point, has been hyper, if not focused, but the results have not necessarily been in Allegheny County. So we're looking forward to working with you on it, to making sure that we're perfecting it, but that was a little bit of the rationale behind the decision making.
Okay. I really appreciate your insight, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to see the governor here with Commerce today. So I represent the Eastern Shore, Worcester and Wycomico. We're pretty based on tourism and agriculture. Unfortunately, I'm hearing word that tourism could be decimated in the budget with, $6 million, $2.5 million going to the 25 destination marketing organizations across the state, leaving $3.5 million to advertise Maryland. So I'm trying to put a lot of faith in what's here, because I'm concerned of the impact to tourism for the state. So looking at the private industry that you've identified in the bill, the different sectors, understanding the Eastern Shore, we don't have much manufacturing and so forth. How do you see this bill fitting in, not only to the Eastern Shore, but just geographic diversity across the state? What opportunities do you see? How do you see it complementing what's there? How do you see it bringing in something new?
Thank you. So one, I can tell you, I think when we're talking about the shore, it's not just tourism and also agriculture. It is also areas like aerospace and defense. One of the things I think specifically for your district delegate, and again, thanks for your work and your partnership on this as well, is when we think about the proximity to things like NASA Wallops, there is a distinct advantage that we think that the lower shore, the shore as a whole, but specifically the lower shore, can actually have on the investments that are taking place within aerospace and defense. And so whether we are talking about aerial drones, whether we're talking about rocket propulsion, whether we're talking about aerospace and defense, but also defense tech, we think these are actually specific industries that the shore can uniquely benefit from these type of investments. And that, I think, was part of the thinking behind the entire build out of the bill, is what areas of the state that we think can have a unique and outsized ROI on some of those specific industries. And so I actually think aerospace and defense, the third leg, is one that is going to have a real core impact on your district as well. I don't know if there's anything else you think I missed on that.
No, I wouldn't add anything. I think that's essentially exactly right. As we have gone through the process on this, it's very analytical on looking how do we spread kind of the benefit of this and spread the wealth around. And those priority sectors that the governor just mentioned, aerospace and defense is one of them, that touches in all the way across the state. Right, I know we'll have former Transportation Secretary John Pecori come up soon, who's done a lot of work in Southern Maryland and Western Maryland, from Hagerstown to California, Maryland, outside of Pax River, to, of course, what you and I talk about often, because I'm kind of a space nut, outside of NASA Wallops. There are humongous opportunities if we're just more targeted about the financing.
Yeah, and you look at benefits, things like Rocket Labs and what's happened with there. I think that's a classic example of the type of the kind of opportunity that we think is, could have a specific benefit for the districts as well.
The folks from NASA Labs talk about, needing private sector for like manufacturing and things like that, where they're right now, they're leaning on states out west, and we could bring those here. You had mentioned like quantum AI, aerospace. So manufacturing, as a individual sector, is that equally supported in the bill?
Yes. So you look at things like manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. Those are examples of things that not only can be leveraged by some of these additional additives that we're having, but also we're talking about the protection of legacy industries as well. So I think that is something that kind of falls into both categories.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Governor, for bringing this bill. And I can tell that, and I really do appreciate the care and detail that you have put in the 139-page bill. What I have a concern about is, first of all, I represent Prince George's County, as you know, and I'm very fond of entrepreneurs, as I'm an entrepreneur and a small woman, minority-owned business. The part of the bill that addresses Ms. Bidva and Smoba, and your staff came by and had a conversation with me. We even had follow-up conversations on Zoom. Yes, and you were there too. Thank you so much for that. My concern is where you're going to take half of the money that's in SMOBA, right, and take it, or is it the opposite? Ms. Bidva?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
So
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
no, I was going to ask, you're saying half the money from.
Are you doing away with one or the other? Or are you taking some of the funds from one program and putting it into the other?
Yeah, so I definitely get the question, so thank you,
Okay.
Delegate. So there are two programs that have some targeting into disadvantaged businesses. There is Ms. Bidfa and SMOBA, which are very fun to say, but doesn't tell much else.
I know.
Those two funds have similar purposes, except SMOBA is tied specifically to areas where there are casinos. That's kind of where it dates back to. They get 1.5% each year of video lottery terminal or slot machine revenue. They're at a place right now, because they're a revolving loan fund, where they have a ton of money. They have $36 million they can get out the door today. They are on track to get another $20 million on July 1st. And they have $166 million, I believe is the figure, out that will get paid back. Based off where we are now, that the program has been active for quite some time, we're looking at, okay, what do we do with all this money? Because it's difficult to get it out the door. Ms. Bidfa, on the other hand, often finds itself needing some additional appropriations, which is great. It's a very successful program. I can see our great Chair of the Black Caucus nodding along as we've had conversations about this. That touches in communities across the state, but it's underfunded, and I think the view of the administration is that it deserves a dedicated revenue source. And so what's presented in the bill there is splitting that 1.5%. So there's 0.75% going to Ms. Bidfa, and still 0.75% going to SMOBA, so that it would be $10 million a year on estimate for the next few years at least into each program to make sure that both have adequate capacity.
Sure. So if you're sharing the funding, so my concern is that, and I know we had a deep discussion about, the different geographical areas that use the funding, right? And how that the fund doesn't always get used up. But from my understanding, Prince George's County is like it's divided up into 9 areas that use the funding. And from my understanding, Prince George's County uses all of that money up to its share. And if the other areas are not using all of the funding, is it possible to, make it so that Prince George's County, say, for example, can go over, because those funds are dedicated to entrepreneurs who are just starting out, small businesses and entrepreneurs who have trouble getting loans elsewhere, right? And so, and with the funds and the grants and everything at stake currently, have we even given consideration to that? Because once we get to a higher level of unemployment that is potentially, and I pray not, but, that's potentially happening, it's going to drive those people to look to entrepreneurship, which to me is a good thing. But if we don't have the funding to dedicate to people who wouldn't otherwise qualify for loans, they're not going to be able to get their businesses off the ground, and particularly minority businesses. So I guess my question is, can we look at that a little bit more?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll follow up after the hearing today and continue to kind of bring all the data and have that conversation.
Sure.
I think we're completely aligned with you within goals, so we'll just talk through some of the details.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Governor. And thank you to everybody on the panel, especially my good friend Mark. Mark, I think you're the first African-American in your role, is that correct?
That's correct.
So I just wanted to make sure we put that on the record because it deserves recognition. Governor. Yeah. Thank you. So, Governor, in December, the Maryland Department of IT released this 2025 AI roadmap. And so I want to kind of focus my comment and questions on that. First, y'all talked about the cybersecurity tax credit. It's some money that I wrote a bill last year to try to take, and so I'm really glad that y'all updated it. But that roadmap talked about cybersecurity for AI and AI for cybersecurity. So my comment on that piece is just, I just want to give kudos to you and your team for really updating that because we need that to be working. As it pertains to AI, I think this committee will tell you that I've been a bit of a broken record, myself and Delegate Hornberger a little bit, when it comes to AI. The roadmap talks about AI. The AI revolution has the potential as a force multiplier for the state's economic development goals. So I'm really glad that y'all are focusing there. What I'm asking today, though, really has to do with per capita GDP. You talked about, and I can't remember the exact phrasing, how you want to focus on areas of high opportunity. So where do you think, or how do you anticipate some of the work that will come from this act to increase per capita GDP in the state and thus have a positive impact on our revenues and growth? And then I got a second question, which is for Mark, which is having to do with upsurge. And can you talk about a little bit more about what the potential impact of that acquisition will be?
Okay.
Yeah. I'll take the first one, if that's all right. First, and thank you for not just the leadership now, but to your point, the continued leadership on this issue. And yes, I'm incredibly bullish on what I think AI can bring. And it's not just to the space of cyber defense tech, et cetera, but to multiple aspects of our human society, where we're looking about how can we use AI to be able to both increase efficiencies, but then also be able to expand into new industries with a speed that we know it's moving at in other jurisdictions, it's moving at in other states, but Maryland has unique capacity to be able to move faster because of the anchor institutions that we have on board, because we are the home of Johns Hopkins and Morgan State and University of Maryland College Park, but also having that leverage capital and the leverage investments. What it's also going to do is inspire additional private sector leverage capital to be able to come into the space. And so I think for us to be able to really move forward in that, it's going to take both some of the elements that we have within the Decade Act, but also it's going to have to be able to inspire us to be able to both provide the right kind of guardrails, but also provide the pathways for these type of investments to actually have measures of long-term fruition. The thing that we're most excited about what we think AI could actually bring to this conversation is it's not going to be restricted to specific geographic boundaries. That you can watch AI technological supports and everything from how we're dealing with farmland to how we are dealing with healthcare to how we are dealing with educational supports. And so I think the breadth of what we can look at is expansive. I also think that Maryland, needs to be able to move faster, to be able to actually unearth that, and that's why we appreciate your partnership and your leadership on this as well.
Great. So I'll talk about the acquisition of Upsurge for GBC. So when Upsurge was founded, GBC and the regional economic development infrastructure was very fragmented. And so they did a great job of building a core group of people who were really excited about building an innovation economy. That said, over the last 2 years, with our merger with the Economic Alliance, we've published our own 10-year plan. I've hired a team of people who've done everything from rural economic development to high tech in major cities. And so the alignment now is in place for us to really scale Upsurge's work to support early stage to growth companies across the broader MSA in the region. And so what you're going to see is really the infrastructure to support entrepreneurs and big companies that actually want to invest in the ecosystem now have a better platform with the collaboration.
Thank you. Just to conclude, Madam Chair, I just want to put on the record and on the table, Mr. Governor, that with some of the investments that y'all are focused on, I could easily see 5 to 10% and maybe even more annual growth in GDP, especially as we focus on AI. And if we're able to democratize it in a significant way, that's attainable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Amen. Thank you.
Delegate Griffin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Governor, for bringing forth the bill. So my question really focuses around Harford County, where I represent, and some of our economic growth opportunities. We've had some unique challenges in Harford County recently around economic growth that I know you're familiar with, Mr. Governor. And one of our biggest opportunities right now is we've been labeled the Drone Center of Excellence, specifically around the Harford County Airport, which is a privately owned airport, but supported by the Department of Transportation. And there's a lot of drone manufacturers wanting to bring their business into Harford County, into Maryland, looking to build more hangars on this airport, which will bring in, hundreds of jobs, high-paying jobs, tech jobs, and really make Maryland and Harford County specifically the center of drone innovation for the world, which so much is going on behind the gate of the APG right now. So between certainly the economic development piece, the ability to stand up these hangars, the ability to bring the airport to the 21st century to support this, and also to help with some of the zoning opportunities that may be required to be able to stand this up. Can you talk about how this bill would potentially support that?
Yeah. So one, I have nothing to add in terms of my excitement about what I think the future of aerial drones, the future of rocket manufacturing, and the impact that that's going to have on Harford County. Because I do think that there are unique assets to include the leveraging of APG that there is specifically could have an economic rebounding effect. I think part of what we intended for the Decade Act is that it's both about how are we targeting the investment, but it's also thinking about the permitting and the regulatory adjustments that would need to be made in order to have these investments make sense. That's why we think that the Decade Act is actually an important leverageable bill as well, because the things that we continue and have continued to see is when we're talking about that increasing dollars into it cannot be the solution alone, is there is a longer history of actually making investments in certain areas, but unless you have certain regulatory adjustments that are made, those dollars end up going into a VAT. That does not have the kind of return as intended because you have essentially a regulatory environment that ends up strangling what those investments could actually do. And so one of the things that we are hoping to do within this bill is actually helping to unlock not just the capital and the leverage capital, but also saying that what other type of adjustments need to be made to that other type of permitting environment that can actually help those investments actually grow and get the kind of returns that we're hoping for as well.
Well, I appreciate the answer, and hopefully this summer, if you get some time, come up. We'd love to have you up at the Harford County Airport and show you what we're working on.
Would absolutely love that.
Thank you.
Absolutely
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Governor, for bringing this bill, and again, for your commitment and thoughtful and creative thinking about how we expand our economy in the state. I did want to go back to the issue of Ms. Bidfa that, as Mr. Fallon has mentioned, has been an important priority and really important fund because, as colleagues may know, this fund specifically supports economically disadvantaged and socially disadvantaged businesses, particularly providing wraparound services, including surety bonding, low finance loans, and other types of programs. And I do want to mention and thank you, Governor, because last year your administration worked with us to transfer about $10 million into that fund because it was unfunded. But we shouldn't have to finagle and search and find funds for these socially and economically disadvantaged businesses to benefit from this program. So with that in mind, I think a really important piece of this bill is identifying a revenue source so that the Ms. BIDFA fund can actually be funded. So I wanted to ask Mr. Fallon if he can just comment on the current funding source or lack of funding source for Ms. Bid for this really important program, and how the bill will help ensure that economically disadvantaged businesses are able to benefit from the resources of Ms. BIDFA.
Absolutely, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I mean, I think the basic premise and the most important part of the proposal related to Ms. BIDFA's MOVA does is that splitting of the VLT revenue. And that way, to your point, we're not scrambling each year and checking all the couch cushions for pennies to make sure that we're funding the program, but we know each year we have some consistency, and the program managers and the folks that are really carrying it out, both on the state side and the fund manager side, have a degree of certainty as they're building those relationships and doing outreach into the communities, because many of these are not a one-time deal, right? They are communities or businesses that we're trying to grow longer term. So that's from that point of view. From what we actually see is the impact of it. There are some other structural changes included there in the bill that allow some more flexibility for the department to take a look at the individual needs of the business and adapt that. And something that I think is very important to the governor's led on procurement. Right, we have another Procurement Reform Act bill before the legislature, and some part that is utilizing state contracts to make sure that we're providing opportunities and wealth creation for smaller and disadvantaged businesses. Part of what we're looking to allow Ms. BIDFA to do is expand on the contract financing component of the program, so that it can be used for state or federal or local programs, as well as private sector programs. Make sure that we're ramping that up, provide more opportunities, and hit the issue from both ends.
And businesses across the state are able to benefit from the Ms. BIDFA services. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Governor, for being here, bringing this exciting bill. There's a lot of exciting things in it, and of course, there are a lot of things I support, but one of the ones I wanted to talk about, two of the ones, is biotech and the agricultural piece. So agriculture, of course, being very near to my heart in Frederick County, and we don't want to leave that industry out. There's a lot of tech initiatives and growth in that area, so I was wondering if you could speak just a little bit about possibly what this bill would mean for our agriculture and moving forward with that. And then also, a lot of states have been focused on biotech corridors, and Frederick County seems to be left out a lot. It's not part of Western Maryland when we have this category, or it's not part of other initiatives that really kind of help with that biotech the biotech industry. So I was just wondering how you see a corridor working, because we have everything from, it all kind of intersects right at Frederick County, right? So everything coming out from College Park and that area, and then everything coming from Baltimore kind of comes to a point right at Frederick County. And so I think that could be a way where we have this corridor that would be amazing for Maryland, as far as with all the research that we have, plus all the economic drivers that surround that industry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Delegate. And first, I'll take agriculture first. I think one of the things about agriculture is, if you're looking at some of the innovations that are being placed, with some of these industries that we're talking about, I actually think agriculture is one of the areas that is going to be one of the largest beneficiaries of it. Okay. When you're looking at some of the increased technological assets that we have, we were speaking earlier, Delegate Young, about how AI can also be used for everything from agricultural growth to farmland preservation to predictive analytics about invasive species that are actually impacting farmland. I actually think agriculture is a place that could have some of the largest wide-scale growth when you're looking at new investments inside of these industries. That's going to have significant impact on our farmers and our farmland. So it's an area I'd love to be able to explore in you, but it's actually one of the things that makes me most excited about how this could actually impact agriculture. On Frederick, I actually think you hit the nail on the head. Frederick is so uniquely positioned to be able to benefit from this because it's difficult to understand the excitement around that we could have around AI, the excitement that we could have around cyber, the expansion that we can have around life sciences without understanding the role that Frederick is already playing. If you look at that Frederick is not just the fastest growing county that we have within the state of Maryland. That is not by accident. I think it's both because people are benefiting from what's happening within Frederick when it comes to increased technological supports, assets that are sitting there, but it's also the geography that it has to other jurisdictions that are close, and then the assets that are sitting there that Frederick can leverage off of. I actually think Frederick in no way is going to be a jurisdiction that's going to be left behind. I think these are actually spaces and industries that Frederick is going to be able to uniquely benefit from by putting a focus on life sciences, on IT, and on aerospace and defense when you think about the assets that are within earshot range of it. I don't know if there's anything else that you all would add on. And I will say before I turn it over to the GBC, I think there's also it's actually very appropriate to have Mark Anthony here because I think it's appropriate to see when you see the GBC that when people think of Greater Baltimore, they think of Baltimore, and it's not. Yeah. A huge area of focus for GBC is Frederick and the areas around it as well. So I know he can speak to that as well.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is a lot of what this bill does is it improves the fundamental way that commerce treats all industries. And so a lot of what you all are referencing are major manufacturing projects that need faster site readiness, major industries that need a team who can adapt our state's assets to the potential company that's looking to invest. And the bill really puts us on the right path to be more competitive at how we compete against Virginia, Pennsylvania, other places. Then there's a proactive strategy around what market signals are we sending to people who aren't necessarily even thinking about expanding. So when they get to the point 2 expansion, Maryland is in their mind. And so both have major steps forward with this bill, which is why it's important.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that is all the questions for you all today. Thank you again very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we'll call up your next panel, who will each have 2 minutes. Everyone moving forward will have 2 minutes to testify. Jim Hughes, John Porcari, Tasha Cornish, Tom Sadowski, and Troy Lamel-Stovall.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sir, how are you? I'm honored. Hey. Hey there. You're great. Broke the chair.
Who's kicking us off? Somebody start.
Oh, I'm starting?
Anybody?
I thought I was going to go last, so that's fine. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Troy Lamel-Stovall. I serve as the CEO of TEDCO. We stand in support of the Governor's Decades Act. Of that 130-plus pages, TEDCO is a very small part, so we did not contribute to that 130. But that part is a very important part. As many of you know, we invest in early-stage companies. Our goal is to invest in them and to, frankly, make money. But frankly, the way we're set up right now, if that Maryland qualification for that business, because they do what they're supposed to do, which is to grow, if they grow and no longer are Maryland qualified, which means maybe some of their employees are not in the state of Maryland, we have to immediately divest of those companies. And in many cases, I have one example where we lost over $6 million because we had to immediately divest, and that company itself had to give us back almost $500,000. So that was $500,000 they did not have to grow their business. So the change the governor's proposing would allow us for up to 5 years to keep that investment if it makes economic development sense to keep that investment. So again, we thank you for the consideration and open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jim Hughes. I'm a Senior Vice President with the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I'm representing UMB as well as the University System of Maryland, and we are very supportive of this bill. All of you know, with a dozen institutions, we have an impact throughout the state. And each of those institutions are very focused on the regions around them, so that College Park plays a role that is different than Frostburg. So you really get that regionalization. We also, among those institutions, have very strong strengths in the areas that the bill is focusing on, as well as a number of other areas really matching the economy of the whole. And as you know, the USM primary impact is we award 8 out of 10 bachelor degrees in the state of Maryland through USM institutions. So our primary impact is on education and employment. But under Jay Chancellor and certainly my president, Bruce Jarrell, we have a strong focus on economic development, more traditional economic development. So we work closely with the Department of Commerce, with TEDCO, with MEDCO, with local economic development. And wanted to specifically focus on the RISE zone. This expands legislation that's been around for a while and significantly increases the impact of it. So what we're looking at UMB, we created a research park. We call it the Biopark 20 years ago. We have worked to get a RISE zone in the park, and it is all of 1 acre. We just opened a $100 million building on that 1 acre, but we would like to expand the RISE zone to cover a much broader area around the campus to really have a significant impact on West Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Porcari. I'm a resident of Prince George's County. I've had the honor and privilege of twice serving as the Maryland DOT Secretary, serving President Obama as Deputy Secretary of Transportation, and most recently President Biden in a temporary role as the White House Port and Supply Chain Envoy. In the last 35 years, one thing that I found is that transportation and economic development are 2 halves of the same coin, and in fact they go together. I'm here to support the Decade Act on behalf of the aerospace and defense sector because it can benefit every portion of the state. The governor recently signed an executive order setting up an advanced aerial mobility council for the state to maximize our opportunity as Marylanders to bring in some of the advanced aerial mobility concepts, whether it's electronic vertical takeoff and landing, new regional aviation concepts, advances in aeromedical, or some of the defense-related AAM uses, bring them to Maryland and capitalize on the assets that we have. That's what we will be doing through the AAM Council. We expect that to be working throughout the state to the benefit of the entire state, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Greetings, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Tasha Cornish, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to strengthening the Maryland cybersecurity industry. Our association represents over 600 businesses and over 100,000 Marylanders as employees. We appreciate the opportunity to offer testimony today. We enthusiastically support the enhancements specifically to the Research and Development Tax Credit and the Innovation Incentive Tax Credit, as was detailed earlier. My testimony today will reflect specifically on the importance of modernizing the Buy Maryland Cyber Tax Credit. As we've heard, it was created about 5 years ago now to encourage small businesses to invest in cyber technologies and services from Maryland-based vendors. The program has been underutilized due to restrictive eligibility criteria, administrative complexity, and the lack of clear intent language. And we're very excited about the changes. 3 that I'm going to highlight today is the expansion of eligibility. So the bill seeks to broaden eligibility for businesses seeking cybersecurity tax credits by removing the employee cap. So cyber is not an optional investment for companies of any size, and organizations are increasingly required to conduct third-party assessments to maintain their contracts and grow their businesses. This tax credit is a force multiplier for companies seeking cyber solutions and Maryland cyber companies. The refundable aspect of this, as we know, essential health and human services are frequently delivered by nonprofit entities with limited admin resources, so making this refundable would allow us to have continued continuity of care, for our essential services. And removing the service cap really highlights that cybersecurity is people, processes, and technology, and really investment in cyber should align with those core values. So thank you for the opportunity. Happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm Tom Sadowski, Executive Director for the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, MEDCO for short, and I'm pleased to be here to testify in support of the Decade Act. This body created MEDCO 40 years ago to serve and support the state's strategic economic development needs, and it is in that capacity that we testify on behalf of the Decade Act, because I think it's going to leverage a lot of our core strengths and capabilities. Over the past 40 years, we've issued more than $8 billion worth of revenue bonds to help support projects, built 12,000 student housing beds throughout the state at our various higher ed institutions. We financed and constructed new health laboratories, energy facilities, SCIF spaces, and critical infrastructure that support federal labs and our military installations. We've done a lot of things to support critical economic development objectives throughout the state, whether it was rural, urban, or suburban. Last year was our biggest year ever. We did more than $1.2 billion in revenue bond financing for projects, and we supported to the tune of $60 million, nearly $60 million, minority enterprise in the furtherance of our real estate and construction projects. We were built to do the kind of work that the governor has asked us to do. We work with our partners at the various departments of Commerce, DHCD, Department of Transportation, in furtherance of their missions. And it's by part of this bold legislation that we think we can do more to build and improve innovation infrastructure, create places around our military installations, federal facilities, and our higher ed institutions to help expand the realm of economic development opportunities for the state. So it's in that capacity that I thank you for your time, consideration, and I really request your favorable report of this critical legislation, and willing to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the governor's panel. We'll call up other individuals signed up to testify favorably. Deborah Hemingway, Sam Hopkins, Grant Johnson, Chris Reese-Mendel, Heather, wait a second. It's only two of you? Okay. Deborah Hemingway, Sam Hopkins, Grant Johnson, Chris Reese-Mendel, and then I'll call Kevin Canali and Heather Tonelli, if you're here. Come on up. Okay, sir, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Reese-Mendel. I'm the owner of Epic Inc., a Maryland-based managed service provider and managed security service provider, or outside outsourced IT. And we've been in business in Maryland for over 28 years. Epic is proud to be one of the qualified Maryland cyber sellers providing essential IT support, cybersecurity solutions, and compliance assistance to small businesses across Maryland. We serve businesses ranging from $1 million to $75 million in revenue, with approximately 38% of them being woman or minority owned. Every day we work to prevent cyber attacks against these businesses, including those in your district, helping them safeguard their sensitive data, maintain operational continuity, and stay compliant with ever-evolving cybersecurity regulations. The importance of the Qualified Maryland Cyber Tax Credit. Cybersecurity is not a luxury, it's a necessity these days. However, for many of these businesses, especially those with outdated systems, the cost of securing their operations is a significant challenge. The total cost of technology ownership ranges anywhere from $6,000 to $20,000 per employee annually, depending upon their vertical. The Qualified Maryland Tax Credit has been instrumental in making cybersecurity more accessible, enabling businesses to invest in modern technology, obtain cyber insurance, and meet critical compliance requirements. The program has directly contributed to strengthening Maryland's economic by reducing cyber risk, fostering business growth, and supporting job creation in the cybersecurity sector, as well as many other sectors. Proposed enhancements program, we recommend that to maintain Maryland's leadership in cybersecurity, we further support local businesses, and we respectfully urge the Assembly to consider the following enhancements. Maintain the tax credit refundable for nonprofits, remove the seller's caps, streamline buyer qualifications, and eliminate the employee cap. With doing these things, we see that the program will continue to flourish and help other organizations. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Hi, delighted to be here today. Excuse me. For the record, my name is Deborah Hemingway, and I'm the founder and managing partner of EC4 Capital. We're an early-stage medtech venture capital firm in Baltimore. Starting a business is hard, as many of you and your family members and your constituents can attest. It's expensive, time-consuming, full of uncertainty. But in Maryland, I've witnessed firsthand the unique opportunity we have, particularly in the medical sector, to become a driving force. Over the past 2 years, my firm, EC4 Capital, has raised over $15 million from investors and put that money to work here in Maryland in our most promising medical device startup companies. A key factor to our success has been leveraging the Biotechnology Investment Incentive Tax Credit Program, or the BITC. This program was designed to attract investment into Maryland's life science ecosystem. However, there's a problem. The BITC program doesn't operate as smoothly as it should. When investors encounter administrative hurdles and delays, they become frustrated, hesitant, and ultimately less willing to invest. And when the investors pull back, the companies struggle to fundraise the capital that they need to grow and innovate and create jobs here in Maryland. So this bill fixes that problem by allowing pass-through entities, like my firm, to claim and allocate these tax credits at the entity level. This simple refinement will make the program more efficient and more effective, and will ensure that the investment dollars continue to flow seamlessly into Maryland's most promising life science companies. So by supporting this bill, and particularly this particular section, you're not just improving the BITC program, you're also strengthening Maryland's leadership in medical innovation and supporting our most promising life science companies. So thank you, and I'm delighted to answer any questions.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am Heather Tonelli, the Director of Economic and Tourism Development for Queen Anne's County, which is on the Eastern Shore and one of the rural counties throughout the state. I am here today to support the Decade Act with a proposed few amendments, and we ask you to consider broadening the industry focus, as we've heard today through several of the members of the committee. Many of the focuses of the new Decade Act don't necessarily align with the rural communities and the industries that we have. And if you look at the asset-based approach of what assets are available within some of the more rural areas, many of those assets don't necessarily support the industries that the state is focused on, although we want for our larger communities to certainly have those industries within the state. We also ask that you consider looking at keeping the job creation tax credit, which is JCTC for short, and that allows for workforce development and job creation. I heard today that the ROI on many of these programs don't substantiate continuing these incentives. I ask you to consider that an ROI for a larger county like Prince George's per se versus an ROI for a Queen Anne's County is much different. 10 jobs, 60 jobs is significant for a small rural community versus our larger counties that have more tools in their toolbox. Our rural counties don't have as many tools, and so these incentives that are currently in place are extremely important. We are very excited and support the state's efforts to revamp how we look at economic development because it's so important that we are competitive and we're job creators, and we support all those that are considering moving to our county. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of the bill. With amendments, you do have my written testimony. I would like to just make a few points. 4 things really, and a lot of this echoes Ms. Tonelli's testimony. Number 1, we'd like to just make sure that we preserve local economic development flexibility in this bill. Economic development starts at the local level. They are the boots on the ground. They understand what's happening in their communities and what their communities need. We'd also like to protect some of these job-creating incentives that Ms. Tonelli also spoke about, particularly the enterprise zone, the One Maryland credit. I know that there are reports that say these are ineffective, but 20 jobs in Garrett County might not seem like a big deal here, but out there it is. It moves the needle, trust me. We'd also like to make sure that counties have meaningful input in funding decisions at MEDAF and other economic development programs. Again, I think that is the intent of the bill, but we'd just like some belt and suspenders to make sure that that happens. And then really just making sure that workforce development investments align with job needs in certain counties, in the counties in which they're trying to help. So we think taking a regional approach and looking at what kind of jobs are needed in Western Maryland and on the Eastern Shore and in the middle of the state makes a lot more sense than just focusing on the needs of the middle of the state. So those are great, but we think that taking a bit of a more regional approach could make sure that we're making sure that we're investing in every single county and that this bill will work for everyone. So happy to work with the committee and the administration moving forward, and we're supportive of the bill, but we'd just like to make sure that counties have a seat at the table, that we're looking at this across the board and not just in the center of the state, and that we're aligning our investments with actual need on the ground in terms of jobs and training. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 498, Delegate G, House Bill 1450, and I think the one witness you had across the street probably for the governor's bill. Oh, no, you're coming. Okay, here we go. Perfect.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, now Madam Vice Chair as
I like your
well.
haircut, Delegate G. It looks good.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes it works. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. I promise this is my last bill for the session in front of this committee. A few years ago, this committee passed a bill that I sponsored to establish a state matching grant for those companies that have already qualified for the federal SBIR, which is Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR grants. And the purpose of that grant program, of course, was to incentivize and encourage those early stage R&D companies with great commercialization potential to thrive and stay in our state. TEDCO, which is the leading organization for the state to support technology development, only got the money last year under this administration to actually administer the program, even though the program was established by law about 3-4 years ago. So in administering the program, they realized there are some restrictions that need to be removed in order to be effective. So here's why I'm here, to make that request. So this very simple bill simply says it would give TEDCO the flexibility to decide how many companies should receive grant each fiscal year without changing the overall grant size. Okay, and how much each company can qualify for. Because right now, it's pretty prescriptive by saying between phase 1 and phase 2, you can only qualify up to 25% of the match, and it says 25,000 for phase 1 and 75,000 for phase 2. So this bill would say we'll leave it to TEDCO to decide based on their strength and competitiveness and technology, viability of their technology. And the second point is this bill would clarify that each company per fiscal year can only qualify for 1 grant. So that's all it does. It's a very simple bill without asking for any funding increase. So with that, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Mindy Lehman. I'm the Chief Government Relations and Policy Officer for TEDCO, and I really want to thank the bill sponsor, Delegate Chief, for her leadership and support on this important program. The federal grants that flow into across the country, but specifically into Maryland, are incredibly important to support these small businesses with their tech transfer and product development. Those federal grants specifically go to help these early stage tech startups with product development. The matching grant alternatively goes to those general expenses such as marketing, et cetera, that is so vital to help these small businesses grow and succeed. The delegate did a great job of explaining the bill. The language, original language, is pretty prescriptive. It notes, it stipulates that TEDCO can only award 20 Phase 2 awards and 10 Phase 1. So this change would just allow, if we get a greater demand for Phase 2, we'll have the flexibility to make more awards in that Phase 2 versus Phase 1. So it provides that additional flexibility. The fiscal note does not change on this. The overall funding amount remains a discretionary budget item, which is annually approved through the budget process, put in by the governor, and then approved through that General Assembly process. So that's the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1450. Delegate Long, House Bill 1286.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, for hearing this bill, and thank you, Ways and Means. This bill come to me, I don't know if anybody remembers back when the hostages were taken. Hold on for a minute, let me see this. Hostages were taken in Iran back many years ago. I actually had a friend that was taken hostage. His father was taken hostage, was there for I don't know how many days, but actually was released right after Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president. Does anybody remember that? Well, it happened. And that's one reason I brought this bill forward, because I remember hearing the hardship his son had by his dad being held hostage. All right, this would provide target relief and support for individuals and families facing exceptional hardships. On average, 200 or 300 Americans are taken hostage or kidnapped abroad per year. Only a handful of these are Marylanders, so the potential of lost revenue, as stated in the fiscal note, would be minimal to non-existent. Just because a problem only affects a few individuals, that doesn't mean we should not protect the few that really does affect. We don't want the innocent people to come home and be treated as tax cheats. Right now, if you're taken hostage, your taxes still go on. So what we're doing is asking for the comptroller to come up with a plan or go by this bill, not hold them responsible for any taxes for that period while they're being held hostage. Like I said, my friend went through a lot, being held hostage, his father being held hostage. I'm sure, I don't even know what happened when his father got released, what back taxes he owed, and basically that's what this bill is about. And I think we need to be proactive. Hopefully we never need it, but I think this is something we need to be proactive on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1286. Delegate Long, House Bill 1192.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we know, Israel and Palestine continues. We want to make sure that nonprofits that have been in the streets protesting against Israel are not funneling funds over the terrorist groups Hamas. I'd like to take some time to discuss a specific case. A Gaza nonprofit tied to the son of a Hamas leader received nearly $1 million in aid from the U.S. government, with one grant arriving less than 1 week before October 7th terrorist strike on Israel. The most recent grant of $15,000 was paid October 1st, 6 days before the Hamas attacked on Israel, left 12,000 Israelites dead. We want to make sure that if the nonprofit is really truly a nonprofit, they're acting as a nonprofit and not funneling money to terrorist organizations. Relief funding is made possible, said Sam Woodrup, Director of Middle East Foreign Counterterrorist Program and Practices. However, these characters operate as an arm of Hamas, building an infrastructure projects. We just want to make sure that if a nonprofit is actually acting as a nonprofit, they're not funneling money to terrorist organizations. That's what this bill is for. It's actually based after a federal bill that was just passed. And I thought, you know, we wanted to make sure that statewide we do the same thing. Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, for the record, Delegate Bob Long for
Okay.
HB 1190.
Okay, are there any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1192. Delegate Miller, House Bill 1418.
For information, lottery. Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Delegate April Miller, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify on House Bill 1418. House Bill 1418 would strengthen Maryland's gaming laws by explicitly prohibiting illegal online gambling and betting activities in the state. While Maryland has a regulated and legal gaming industry, unlicensed and unregulated online platforms continue to operate in the shadows, siphoning revenue away from our state while exposing consumers, especially young people, to significant risk. Illegal online gaming is a difficult industry to track and regulate because much of it operates outside the United States, often in countries with little to no oversight. Many Maryland residents engaging in online gaming have no idea they are using illegal, unregulated platforms, and these bad actors offer games that look and feel legitimate, but without oversight. There are no consumer protections, no guarantees of fair play, and no assurance that winnings will ever be paid out. At the same time, we are seeing a troubling rise in gambling activity among young people who are particularly vulnerable to the accessibility and deceptive marketing tactics of these illegal platforms. Online gambling has never been easier to access, and without regulation, these platforms are aggressively targeting youth through social media and other digital channels. If we don't act now, we risk an entire generation developing harmful gambling habits before they even understand the risk. The American Gaming Association estimates that Americans spend over $551 billion annually on illegal gaming. While we don't yet have a precise figure for Maryland, we do know these platforms are accessible and being used by residents. That's why HB 1418 is so critical. This bill sets the foundation for understanding the scope of illegal gambling online in Maryland by requiring the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency to gather key data. The report due by January 1st of 2026 will help us identify how these platforms operate, how Maryland residents, particularly our youth, are accessing them, and what tools are available to disrupt illegal gambling activity in our state. We have to start somewhere, and HB 1418 is that first step. This legislation ensures we are using the resources available to begin addressing illegal gaming, protecting Maryland consumers, especially our young people, and preserving the integrity of our regulated gaming industry. I urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions?
Some of us more than others.
Okay, there are no questions.
All right.
All right,
Easy to
thank you.
answer. Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1418. Delegate Vogel is not here. Delegate Plakovich-Carr, House Bill 919, and you have two.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Plackage-Carr, here to present House Bill 919. And I am offering this bill as an additional option as we wrestle with how to close our state's $3 billion budget deficit. So this legislation would implement the recommendations of our nonpartisan Department of Legislative Services regarding several tax credits. Under state law, DLS is tasked with periodically evaluating state tax credits. And each year they complete several evaluations that are publicly published. They look at a number of factors, including whether the tax credit is meeting its objectives and whether the goals of the tax credit could more effectively be carried out by other means. And these are intensive evaluations that often involve multiple DLS staff preparing and reviewing the reports. And I'll give a second shout out for the day to our great analyst, George Butler, who has both authored and reviewed some of these evaluations over the years. And if you haven't read one of these evaluations on any of these tax credits, I would encourage it. They really are written in very plain English, are meant to be very informative, and they are. And there's some links in my written testimony to recent evaluations. So over the years, DLS has unequivocally recommended that certain tax credits be eliminated because they are ineffective and duplicative. Yet these credits are still on the books and still being awarded. And that's because instead of taking up DLS's thoughtful recommendations, we as a body have nibbled around the legislative edges by making small changes that don't really address the core problems that DLS identifies. Then the tax credits continue on until they get evaluated again a few years later, and inevitably DLS reports back that the amended tax credits aren't working, that they are ineffective and duplicative and should be terminated or consolidated, and the cycle continues. So this bill would finally implement DLS's recommendations on these tax credits. If a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit isn't the right opportunity to get rid of some of these zombie credits, I don't know what is. So in addition to sunsetting several tax credits as recommended by DLS, the bill would alter or repeal several other tax exemptions that benefit special interests. And I'll note that although I didn't include enterprise zones in this bill, I am supportive of the administration's proposal on that front. Collectively, the changes in this bill would save at least $82 million over the next several years, and that's without the fiscal note scoring 6 provisions of the bill, so the real total is undoubtedly higher. At a time when our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee are going line by line through the budget to find savings, I think we should be doing the same thing in terms of tax expenditures. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do, especially given the other cuts we are facing this session. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Delegate Plakovich-Carr? Okay, thank you very much. 2 folks are signed up, but I think they're gone. Deborah Hemingway signed up unfavorable. I think she had to go across the street. And I do not see Bruce Bariano. So that concludes the hearing on House Bill 919. Delegate Vogel, House Bill 1390, and Karen Morgan.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee, Delegate Vogel here with House Bill 1390. I don't have to tell any of you that there is a growing number of scams in the state. Those scams disproportionately target seniors in our state. And when the 2017 Trump tax cuts were passed, I believe there's a longer name for those, I forget it right now, but it was the deduction for now I'm forgetting the exact, a deduction for scam losses was essentially removed, and folks can no longer deduct losses related to scams in their taxes, meaning that if you lose thousands and thousands of dollars, or in certain circumstances what we're seeing is folks have money withdrawn from their pensions or 401k that's counted as income, then they are liable for, they have to pay taxes on that income. There was just a really compelling story in the Washington Post on an individual who was scammed hundreds of thousands of dollars and then owed tens of thousands of dollars on taxes on top of that. There is an initiative, there are efforts at the federal level to try to address this in our federal tax code, but we would also need to, or we can make changes to our state tax code to provide some relief to these individuals that are victims of scams and frauds. With that, I urge a favorable review on House Bill, favorable report on House Bill 1390.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Karen Morgan. I'm a member of the Executive Council for AARP Maryland, and we are here today to testify in favor of House Bill 1390. And thank you, Delegate Vogel, for introducing this bill. This bill is here to correct a cruelty on top of cruelty. It's bad enough that your funds are stolen. To have them treated as income that you never get to benefit from just really seems like piling on. And that's why we're in favor of House Bill 1390. One of our ambassadors, a woman who I greatly admire, turned what was a financial tragedy into a call for national service. After being victimized by a romance scam, she was then told by her accountant that she owed $5,000 on the money that was stolen that she never saw. And the other thing about this is that when you retire, the dirty little secret that they don't tell you is that there are other kinds of gotchas. Like if you qualify for Medicare, if your income exceeds a certain amount, then you become subject to what's called the IRMA, the income-related something adjustment act. Adjustment charge. Anyway, when your income exceeds a certain amount, then your Medicare premiums go up. And I've seen that happen in my own personal life. So not only do you have money stolen and you're victimized by that, then you have to pay taxes on that money and you're victimized by that, and your Medicare premiums might be going up. In last year, AARP noted that there were over 51,000 occurrences of fraud involving bank transfers, nearly $2 billion, and a good bit of that was taxable. And we need that to change, which is why we would like the committee to issue a favorable report on House Bill 1390. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Delegate Hartman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an interesting bill. The question I have is, if the governor's bill passes where we eliminate itemized deductions, will there be a tool for this deduction here? How would it be claimed if there's no itemized deductions?
Thank you for the question, Delegate. It's a longer conversation, and we have to see what happens with that bill. But under current state tax law, this bill would definitely be helpful.
Under proposed tax law, this bill would be rendered.
We can continue that discussion as we see what happens with both this bill and that bill.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle.
I mean, this is, to me, just a good bill, very common sense that people shouldn't pay taxes on money that they can demonstrate. How do you demonstrate to, just logistically, how do you demonstrate to the tax collector that the monies were stolen through some theft or fraud scheme? Does there has to be a criminal prosecution? I mean, just the logistics of, someone may say, oh yeah, don't count that 10,000, I lost it through this scheme. How do you prove that to the sufficiency of the state comptroller?
Thank you, Delegate. And right now, under this bill, you need to attach a police report, and I believe we had also discussed an affidavit at one point, but that is a good question, and one that I think right now we've outlined a mechanism for that, but happy to continue working on that as well.
I think that's important. People who legitimately have this happen, I don't know why we would tax them and penalize them, but we want to make sure that we're getting the legitimate situations and not opening up loopholes, so to speak. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing to that, too? I mean, as AARP definitely supports victims taking a role in their own recovery, which is why producing a police report, we encourage people to report to the police, to the FDC, wherever they can, whenever they are victimized by fraud. And so it makes sense, as far as we're concerned, to produce the police report to demonstrate that the fraud occurred.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope you appreciate what I'm about to say as a former judiciary member. But the hypos come when you spent some time in judiciary, and I could see a hypothetical. And first off, I think it's a great bill, but I could see a hypothetical with the low. I think it's a very low bar with regard to a police report, and I think the state would likely need some measure of a protection wherein if an individual leveraged that bar to thus perpetuate fraud against the state, I would probably want to see a penalty of perjury. You have to sign to the penalty of perjury to get the credit as well, or to get the modification. So I guess isn't that so, or would that be something that you would be open to exploring?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1390, Delegate Fair, House Bill 1134, and you have Elise Cohen and Sarah Price.
All right. I do not see Ms. Price, but you can refer to her favorable testimony in your system, and if she shows up, we'll add her to the panel. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee, for the record, Delegate Chris Fair here to present House Bill 1134, which clarifies how small sports betting facilities in Maryland can utilize and advertise their business partners' rewards programs. I'm going to deviate from my prepared comments and just talk openly about this bill, and more importantly, the letter of information that the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control decided, unfortunately, to submit that includes information that I find trouble with. So during the interim, we spent a lot of time working on how to create more equitable systems for our sports wagering facilities. In 2020, by popular referendum, the state of Maryland decided to expand into sports wagering facilities. We did it at the time. If you go back and watch the hearings and watch the debates, you will hear them talk about the desire to diversify our gaming market throughout the state. That is geographical, that is with our ownership, that is with the people that own these facilities throughout the state. The goal was to diversify the marketplace so that it was not completely controlled in one area or one series of areas. That was the goal when we looked at sports wagering. Since the time that we passed the sports wagering referendum, we have seen a huge cannibalization of sports wagering facilities, and many of the small business owners, like the one sitting next to me, have struggled to be part of the package that brings both geographical diversity as well as a diversity in ownership and diversity in programs to the state. They have sought countless times going to the Lottery and Gaming Control Commission to seek ways to address these inequities, to create a safer and more balanced system that guarantees that diversity that we sought in the General Assembly when we put this to referendum and added sports wagering to our list. The suggestion somehow from the Gaming Commission, from the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, that a rewards program in and of itself is tantamount to allowing a Class A facility to operate inside of a Class B facility is on its face absurd. It is disrespectful to the owners of Class B facilities who work day in and day out to fight for their businesses, to see them survive inside of a larger organizational structure that benefits Class A facilities well above Class B facilities, that benefits Class A facilities every single day, while Class B facilities try to just simply survive in the marketplace. I don't say this lightly. Class B facilities need our help. They need us to step in. They need us to provide them with just a few tools to be competitive. And yet at every turn, including with my meetings with them where they outlined that if we simply look at this piece of code and make adjustments, we could free up the Lottery and Gaming Control Agency to be able to provide this exact support that Class B facilities are asking for. And so it's with that I share with all of you that this small change to allow a rewards program to operate is so necessary. I want you all to think of it this way. Imagine if you go into a facility that has a rewards program for your shopping, and you walk into that facility, we'll just say Kohl's, right? You walk into a Kohl's department store, and the Kohl's department store is fully operated by a whole different company, but they use Kohl's as their operator. They make sure that you know that Kohl's is part of their system. They've made a partnership with Kohl's. But when you go to check out, you give them your rewards card, and they said, we can't take your rewards card here. We have our own separate rewards program that only operates inside of this one store and nowhere else. It's absurd. The idea that Class B facilities are meant to have these partnerships, the open door to have these partnerships with Class A facilities, and then told they can't operate under the same rewards program that every other single Class A facility in the country is operating under. They have to create a whole separate rewards program. This is a matter of creating a tool, a device to assist our Class B facilities. It is a matter of equity. It is a matter of helping to create diversity in our gaming market. And I encourage this body to please issue a favorable report on House Bill 1134, and I look forward to hearing from my panel. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, thank you for having me. My name is Elise Cohen, and I'm in favor of House Bill 1134. As the owner of Long Shots, one of Maryland's few retail sports books located outside of a casino racetrack, we are facing severe challenges in both our ability to grow sales and even maintain an operating partner. Sports betting in Maryland was anticipated to be an 80-20 split between online and retail. Instead, we've witnessed online grow to 97.2% of the total handle, making retail, especially for those without the attractions like a casino, incredibly difficult to operate. The majority of Class B license holders, defined as small gaming facilities outside of a racetrack or casino, have either lost their original sports betting partners or haven't been able to attract one at all. In many respects, this is a consequence of the Class Bs not having the same advantages as Class A, a casino or racetrack. Class B simply do not have the funding, name recognition, or technology to compete, and therefore need to partner with a larger organization. This does not mean that the operator is the predominant shareholder or beneficiary. It is simply a business arrangement seen across a number of other sectors. In fact, a typical franchise model is ubiquitous in both hotels and restaurants, where small local owners partner with bigger corporations and in turn have those benefits. While one intent of the Sports Wagering Initiative was to provide women and minorities the ability to gain access to an otherwise exclusive industry, preventing us from utilizing the full benefit of larger partners defeats the purpose. In reality, larger partners are putting smaller ones out of business. One way of preventing such destruction is to pass House Bill 1134. We seek to clarify an interpretation and level the playing field. Class B license holders who have aligned with Class A operators should have the ability to utilize their respective rewards programs. Not only do rewards programs proactively maintain a loyal customer base, they grow interest in the retail network as certain email blasts and promotional play is targeted for in-person gaming. Thank you very much, and hopefully we can pass this bill today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and honorable committee members. Sarah Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance in support of the bill before you. As has been shared with the committee, this is a simple clarification bill, in our opinion, which would allow Class B license holders to utilize their partnerships with Class A's to the full extent available for rewards programs. We are very supportive of the existence of these smaller Class B entities in a way throughout the state to help boost economic development, to create local entertainment epicenters, and to attract consumers, shoppers, visitors, tourists to our smaller communities between, Oakland and Ocean City. We are currently the only state out of all of our surrounding neighbors that have allowed gaming and that allow these partnerships. We're the only ones that currently restrict the Class B license holders from being able to utilize the rewards that are available within the Class A locations. This puts our entities at an economic disadvantage, and we would ask that you please rectify the situation. A lot of these entities are located in the skinnier parts of the state that are very close to our borders, and we would ask that they be put on an equal playing field with their neighbors across the border in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in DC. So we would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Buckle.
Ms. Cohen, when you partner with, say, Caesars, Caesars doesn't own your company, right?
That's correct.
And when you come in, the sign doesn't say this is Caesars or this is the name of their casino in Baltimore. It says it's Long Shots, right?
That's correct.
All you're utilizing them for is some mutual branding and their kiosks, their machines, their regulatory expertise, and their finances. Because when we created the law, we knew that just, smaller businesses could not go out and fully set up a sports gambling book with everything they needed completely on their own, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, we're utilizing a framework that they've set up to allow us to thrive.
And all you're trying to do is it's somebody who's a Caesars, somebody who uses Caesars online and has a Caesars reward program, and maybe they live in Frederick or Carroll County, and they decide, I want to go watch the games today. I want to buy dinner, I want to buy a drink, whatever it is. We get sales taxes on that. Rather than sit at home on my phone, I want to go to your facility, and I can still use my Caesars points there, or I can get a deal there. That's all you want to be able to do.
That's correct. That's it.
Thank you.
And Delegate, if I could just add on to that just briefly and say that there's areas like mobile deposit that certainly is an area where there's a lot of discussion that Class A is not allowed to operate a mobile deposit system inside of Class B. This bill does nothing to change that policy, which continues to reinforce that they are not the same business or a Class A license trying to operate inside of a Class B.
It just says I've got 100 Caesars bucks or whatever it is, and I can come in and put those on the parlay today at Long Shots while I sit there and while I generate income for that small business and for the state of Maryland, rather than sit at home in my boxers and do it that way.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad that amused you, Delegate Fair.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1134.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Buckle, House Bill 1459, and you have Jake Shade, Richard Reinhardt, Bill Costelli, and Hayden Lindsay.
Yes, I'm sure they can all come up at the same time.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, I'll sit here in the center and you guys can turn around and we'll go. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is House Bill 1459, Delegate Jason Buckle for the record. We heard the governor a couple of hours ago sit here, and we had some very intelligent, I think interesting discussions among all members of the panel about how to best do economic development through the diverse areas of the state that each have different programs, different needs, and different resources. And you heard the governor. I was very pleased to have him very clearly say on the record that he supports the Western Maryland Economic Development Fund, and that he believes that it has some unique value of a way to bring economic development to the region of the state that I represent. We did this 4 years ago. We funded $50 million into the fund that applies for Washington, Allegheny, and Garrett counties. Those fund dollars, this will be the last tranche of those monies coming out this year. What this bill does is it extends the life of the fund, and it mandates in the bill, it mandates the continued level of spending at $10 million a year. That's already built into our future budget projections. At a minimum, we certainly would like to have the fund extended and allow the governor, you heard his words, he thinks this is a worthwhile place to make economic investments because it is, in his word, I thought it was a very, very good word, bespoke. It enables people to make direct investments into job creating and population growth creating opportunities in the 3 western counties that have been often left behind in our economic development efforts. The bill also really does, beyond simply extending the life of it and presenting the opportunity for future funding, it really does a couple of other things. It changes the membership of the board. We believe, myself, Senator Quarterman, Senator McKay, Delegate Heineball, and others from the Western Maryland delegation, believe that the board could perhaps be more efficient if we changed the voting membership who decides upon the projects. We had a county commissioner from each county. Those folks did a fantastic job, I think, over the last several years, but it sometimes presents conflicts of interest of having the county economic development department present ideas to their boss, essentially, to a county commissioner who stands in the place of county executives in many of your larger counties. And it also tightens the project criteria. There is an amendment. Mr. Butler has an amendment to the bill. I believe it's on page 5 of the bill. We originally had said, hey, we're going to only provide the funds for job creation at 150% of the median household income for each member county. The individual counties and economic development entities came back to us and said that may make it a little too high. We may not get some projects some years, and the money therefore would not really be utilized to produce population growth or job growth. And we've modified it to keep it in line with a lot of economic development programs in the state. That my good friend Delegate Feldmark has had a variety of amendments over the years to move those standards to 120% of the state's minimum wage in order to qualify for certain credits. And so on page 5 of the bill, Mr. Butler will have an amendment, should it be taken up by the committee, to change that to 120% of minimum wage for that 10-job threshold. I hope that the committee gives this serious consideration and passes the bill. It is the #1 priority, I believe, for many of us in Western Maryland to try to continue growing. We want to grow. I hate coming back here every year and asking my friends throughout the state to help us. We want to help ourselves. We've been down for a long time, and we're sick of it, and we'd love to come back. It's hard. It's hard to have economic growth. It's the most difficult thing I think you can do. We want to continue to be able to utilize this. We've had some success. Mr. Shade is here, who is the executive director of the fund, and he can give you more details about how this has worked and the job-creating metrics it's already begun to produce in all 3 western counties. But we need this. We want this to have some say in growing so that we can be a better partner and a better part of the state for everyone, and certainly for ourselves. So thank you, Madam Chair, and the other individuals will certainly have some interesting things to add.
Thank you. Members of the committee, Madam Chair, it's good to see you again. You had your trip up to Cumberland in the fall, and I hope that you were able to see some of our projects in action at that point. I think the results speak for themselves. We want to be good stewards of state money, of taxpayer dollars. I attached our annual report that is due to the Governor and General Assembly. And some highlights are, in the past 2 years, the fund has supported over $290 million of economic impact. We've made over $36 million in grants, and it's already going to lead to over 1,100 jobs. So we keep it very fair across Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington County. We try to divide it equally, but occasionally, there's some big opportunities in one county over the other. The biggest of which is a school of osteopathic medicine in Hagerstown that we're playing a key role in that. As Delegate Buckle said, it's no shock to anyone in this room that Western Maryland's had extreme economic challenges, and everything that goes along with it, population loss and that kind of stuff. But the state has to continue to help us in some way, shape, or form. And for us, this is our big priority. This is our ask. And I think the key differentiator here, as we discussed in the fall, is, this isn't some fund administered out of Commerce. We're on the ground. We're in the community. We have very broad guidelines that allow people to come to us with their projects. And we have a very professional board that vets those, and I think we've done a very good job with that. So I know that the budget's very tight, it's very difficult, but this is something that would make a huge difference for Western Maryland if you're able to continue the fund for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bill Castelli on behalf of the Allegheny County Board of County Commissioners, and they are strongly supportive of this bill. I won't repeat what other folks have said, but this fund is so important to attracting a lot of that private investment, which does provide that long-term growth and economic opportunity for a county like Allegheny. So we really hope that this county can continue this fund, and we ask for a favorable report.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for letting me be here. My name is Hayden Lindsay. I work for the city of Frostburg, and as Frostburg's administrator, it's my direct responsibility to oversee economic development for not only Frostburg, but a big portion of the surrounding communities. And a major portion of that is economic growth. The George Edwards Fund has been a major proponent of what we've been able to do in terms of economic growth. Without it, a lot of our projects just would not have been affordable or attainable. You know, in the past several years, the George Edwards Fund has given us the means to put in infrastructure improvements, capital improvements, infrastructure that allows us to attract these other businesses. And as written, you know, as already has been stated, the bill would further the fund through 2031. It would set aside specific funds for the bill itself, and it would allow us to have confidence that it would continue to go forward. As was already mentioned, changes would be made to the board, and changes for the fund specifically would be geared towards job growth and economic development, which is key to the economic success of an impoverished area such as Western Maryland. So I think I speak on behalf of many of the taxpayers who want to see their community grow and want to see their kids find a reason to stay in the area, that we want to see this continue to be furthered, and we hope and we kindly and respectfully urge to find a favorable judgment. So thank you on behalf of Frostburg.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Richard Reinhardt with Percy Public Affairs, representing the city of Cumberland. We are here also to support House Bill 1459. As you know, the city of Cumberland has made laudable efforts to inspire and attract new businesses and visitors in the area, from the historic Western Maryland Scenic Railroad to the newly reopened development of the Baltimore Street project. These are just some of the notable examples the city has been making to bring people back to rediscover Cumberland and to the region. These ambitious investments would not have been possible unless we had the commitment from our state leaders like Delegate Buckle and the delegation and all of you. For the last few years, that same commitment has been evident by the uncompromising support by both this administration and the Maryland General Assembly through the annual investment of the George Edwards Fund. The state's investment into this fund has provided substantial benefits to so many capital infrastructure and beneficial projects in the economic development areas. It's an improvement inside the conditions of Cumberland, along with Allegheny County and the region. Specifically for Cumberland, this fund has supported various property owners located on the newly developed Baltimore Street in downtown. These include the Western Maryland Lemonade. This is the Queen City Creamery, the 1812 Brewery, which is absolutely delicious, Will's Hotel, and the Rosenbaum Building. These state dollars are a critical source to our region, and they offer vital assistance to new and innovative economic development that we desperately need to see in Cumberland and our surrounding neighbors. It's for those reasons we respectfully request this committee to give a favorable report to this legislation. Thank you.
Delegate Plakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Buckle, for the bill, and I appreciate the call out on some of the specific businesses that have benefited. That's helpful, and I know we heard more about this during the committee field trip this fall. I actually just wanted to ask a question about some of the bill language where it revises what the criteria are for when a project could get awarded. It's on page 5. So like the first few are self-explanatory, you know, at least 25 jobs. Delegate Buckle, you mentioned about the amendment that's coming on the wages for the second provision.
Right.
It's for the what the new number 3 would be. And I'm just hoping somebody can just give me a better idea of what you envision with the significant population growth in the county or municipality. Like what kinds of projects are you thinking about with that one?
So when we originally did the fund, Senator Edwards and I primarily were the sponsors of it. You know, we included criteria of things that would, projects that would increase wages, or as you see, you know, create new state or local tax revenue. And we think those things became too ephemeral. You know, really anything. You could take a vacant lot and say, hey, we're gonna agree to grade the lot for some developer down the road, and they would say, well, technically that increases state or local revenue because the assessment would in theory go up. What we tried to do with that is allow the municipalities or the county, you know, the locality that's controlling to say, hey, we want to come in and certify to the fund in writing so that there's skin in the game from them having some accountability for it. This project, it may be a housing project. So for example, we sometimes need new housing built in Allegheny, Garrett, and parts of Washington. We're very, very close to West Virginia and Pennsylvania, all three counties, and we just have different building standards. It's just frankly cheaper to build houses in West Virginia and Pennsylvania than it is in most of Maryland, because many of those counties don't have sprinkler requirements, they don't have certain septic system requirements. And so a project may come in and a developer may say, I want to come to Allegheny, Washington, or Garrett. I'd like to build 25, 50, 100, homes, middle-class, affordable homes there, and you can grow your population rather than have them drive 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away into another state and commute into your town. And they're not really job creating per se. The jobs are short-term construction, and then it's just a housing project. But that municipalities, Cumberland, Frostburg, Hagerstown, Oakland, the counties, whomever it may be, could come to the board and say, we believe that this could produce significant population growth in our county, and we're asking you to basically award the credit. So we think that this is all tightening the criteria so that the awards are better calculated towards our objectives, which is wage growth, job growth, and population growth. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1459, and that concludes our bill hearings for today. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and then back room folks, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.